Flor, and welcome to Wonder Women Talk Show. On today's show, we have Mavis, a very inspirational woman who is a writer, a blogger, and she recently just launched her website. We have got a lot to learn from this woman, and I'm thinking, as we say that you don't need to be famous for you to make an impact in the society, let's dive in our conversation. Hi, Mavis.
Hello, Flor. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very, very honored to join your talk show. The invitation in itself caught me a bit by surprise, but I'm really glad to be here today.
I'm happy too. I'm just so excited that I have you here with me. I know that you have a lot to share with the public out there. As they say that women who are smashing goals are putting in work, and I know that it was not a walk in the park for you to be where you are. Mm-hmm. How did you get where you are, and how did you get all those achievements?
Well, Flor, that's a multi-dimensional question, but in essence, thank you for the question. There's a lot in as far as my story and where it all started and originated. And I think growing up, there was a sense of non-belonging because of the fact that I moved different schools majority of the time. So I spent a lot of time, switching schools. I went to 5 primary schools before I finally settled in Windhoek. And what I didn't understand is that everything that happens in life, there's generally something to gain out of it. And in having had to move schools, it means that I was actually learning interpersonal development skills, not understanding it because I was far too young to know what was happening. Because with every school that you go to, you have to actually learn a new, you have to get to know the people that you're coming into contact with. You have to formulate a new group of people. So as a result, I harnessed what they deem interpersonal skills. This worked to my advantage later on in life, not understanding that it actually stems from then. So to answer your question as far as my story, I think I was brought up in a home that spoke about humility. It spoke about making sure that you live the life outside that you would live inside your house, so that there isn't like a disparity. And so I grew up with parents who were very, very supportive in what it is that we do as children, or their kids rather. And so I grew up in a very supportive environment, and that's, I think, really how I'm able to sit here today and be able to talk about accomplishments as well as accolades.
They say that our upbringing, our childhood memories, sometimes they're the one that lead us to where we are.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you grew up in a very loving home. Mm-hmm. Is that what led you to where you are today? Did it somehow contribute to your career choice?
Speaking about career choices, it's actually very interesting because I have 2 dads. I have a biological dad as well as a stepdad who are both amazing fathers, and each one in their own right has played a significant role in where it is I stand today. And so my biological dad works in the engineering space as a lecturer. So having grown up in a home where I constantly see these instruments where he would draw, because back in the day we didn't necessarily have engineering software to actually draw drawings, but rather you actually sat with like a drawing board and so I used to see this at home all the time, and I was incredibly curious as to what he was doing half the time. So my curiosity for engineering stems from my biological dad. However, my stepdad has got the notion that it doesn't matter what gender you are, whether female, male, whatever it is you set your mind to, you can achieve and attain. So growing up in a home that was pro-feminism, and then growing up with a dad who himself was in the engineering fraternity as a lecturer, somewhat shaped that destiny towards studying engineering. Wow. And so each role model in my life had a part to play. My mother, for example, was one of those people who believe in resilience. You do everything that you can to attain what it is that you need to attain. And so looking at engineering and going into it, I thought, why not? I mean, what could possibly hold you back except yourself? So that's how I ended up in the engineering fraternity. And later on in life, I started to just tap into different areas of expertise, whether it be blogging, whether it would be to be a columnist, whether it would be speaking. There's so many different aspects to who I am that really talking about it in one go can be a bit difficult, but I managed to be able to bring it forth and speak on it properly.
How do you even define yourself when someone asks, who are you? What do you normally tell them?
It's incredibly difficult. I mean, every time, but the thing is, so I'm a Queen's Young Leader, I'm an award winner, and so what a Queen's Young Leader is that you're chosen as an aspiring leader within your community, but a young one at that. And so the program in itself has a 12-year mentorship program before you actually receive the award. And so that mentorship process allows you to be able to refine those areas of your life, such that when you have somebody like me who's got so many different aspects to who they are, it becomes incredibly difficult to be able to say who you are in under 1 minute. So what they did is they basically teach you how to be able to introduce yourself and to encapsulate who you are at any given moment. And so that means that depending on who I'm meeting, that's the part of me that I would present, because it has to be relevant to the meeting. However, in a space like this, I think in essence, if I was to describe who I am as Mavis, it would be that I'm a civil engineer who has a love for branding and marketing, and sees value in putting everything that I do in writing, hence why I write. So I think that sums up who I am. The speaking element, in essence, is just an additive on top of everything else that I do.
Your aim in, if I read very well, you said your aim in life is to teach about self-improvement and development.
Yes.
What led you there, knowing that you are a civil engineer and then you diverted from civil engineer and you also aim in helping people with self-improvement?
So the thing is, and I talk about being a multi-versatile person a lot, and it's because when you are operating in a body that has multifaceted parts to it, it means that it's very difficult to know which to bring forth. So I grew up very confused as a child, because I just didn't know what I stood for. I was an introvert and an extrovert at the same time, and those things are not taught about. They either teach you that you're an introvert or that you're an extrovert, never both at the same time. So I'm what they call an ambivert. And so it means that in as much as I loved being around people, I also loved being alone and reading. So those two things really were not coming together very nicely. And so in being multi-versatile, I found that I really battled my own personality for a long time. And so writing for me was a place in which I could actually put things on paper to be able to make sense of what I was feeling on the inside. But then I thought, look, I'm sure there's somebody out there in the world who's probably experiencing the same thing as I. So why not put it on a public platform to be able to share on my journey in the hopes that it could influence somebody else? So self-development is something that I take a keen to because of the fact that as human beings, we're consistently developing. You're never ever the full version of yourself. So it means that you're going to work on the parts of yourself that you don't necessarily like. It means you're going to have to strengthen the parts of you that you do like. So it's a consistent plowing into yourself and so forth. So the only difference is that as opposed to doing it privately, I do it on a public platform to share with other people who might be experiencing the same thing.
You recently shared a post where you interviewed the First Lady, and you mentioned that you were nervous.
Yes.
What were the roots of this interview that you said you have to identify the root cause of the fear first before you face it? And mind you, this was not your first interview. You do a lot, and you are even used to the cameras and interviews.
True. How did I navigate the space? I think the thing is, I have a lot of respect for the First Lady, because she's a phenomenal woman in her right. She does absolutely amazing work in the community as well as in her personal, entrepreneurship life. So because of the respect that I have for her, that's from where the fear was stemming from. Because I work alongside her in the One Economy Foundation, but I've never been the person on the other side of the questioning seat. It's either been we speak together or we're in a conversation, but never really for a public platform. And so I think the reason as to why I was necessarily finding myself fearful in that position is because of the respect that I have for her. Okay. And when I was able to identify that it's not actually fear that I felt, but more respect, because sometimes the two can start to look alike. And I was able to determine that I was not fearful of the interview, but I was actually respectful of the person who stands on the other end. And I wanted to make sure that I do well and that I deliver at the best of my capability to be able to make sure that her voice is heard properly. So, yeah, I guess every situation in life will present a different opportunity for you to uncover who you are, why you think the way that you think. And I guess that was a telling moment for me.
So how was it?
It was amazing. It was amazing because I think every opportunity spent speaking to her is amazing in itself, because you really realize how intellectual she is when she speaks, because she has a thing about her where she just processes differently. And I think I'm in awe of the manner in which She's able to process facts as well as things. So in essence, I use every opportunity in which I come into contact with her to learn from her.
Okay. Let's talk about trusting the process. You mentioned that it took 12 years for you to be awarded as a the young leader.
Yes.
It was 12 years.
12 months.
Oh, 12 months.
Correct.
Yeah, it's still it was a process. It
Correct.
didn't just come like that. And most of us want things to be done instant. Like we don't want to trust the process. It was probably a long journey for you to be where you are today, to achieve all that you have now.
Yeah.
And even to be a blogger and you to launch your website. How do you advise our young people to be very patient and not to lose focus on what they want to achieve?
Thank you for the question, Flor. I think at the end of the day, we're a generation of instant gratification simply because we do live in the technological era. I mean, if you want to order pizza, it's literally a phone call away. If there's a lot of instant gratification that comes with our particular era, and that's because of social media and the fact that you post a picture, 200 likes later, there's a hormone that's released in that process that makes us feel good. So sometimes we start to chase that feel good feeling as opposed to understanding that there's a lot to gain in the journey. Because if you skip the journey, there's lessons within that journey that you could skip at the end of the day. And so I think, speaking on instant gratification, it is something I myself used to struggle with a lot earlier in life because I felt that I wanted it now and I wanted it done immediately and I wanted to succeed immediately. And I think these are all valid feelings. But at the end of the day, it's understanding what is to be gained in the process in itself. And I think I actually had to sit with myself and understand, what do I have to gain in the process? And I think, in essence, when you look at the journey of successful people, they all have a story of how they got to where they got to, such that when they find themselves in the seat in which their dreams and ambitions were based on, they're able to look back, and those are the things that equip them to be able to sit there. So it does not help you want to sort of fast forward life or skip the phases of building, because in essence there is value to be gained in the process. And I think so, to answer your question as far as how do I stay patient, it's valuing the process. Because if you don't value the process, you find yourself in a state of frustration, consistently feeling like I should be elsewhere as opposed to where you are. But there's a lot to be gained in the journey and the process. And I'm lucky also because I have mentors that are able to sort of slow me down and help me ease into the process, especially because I feel frustrated too sometimes. I mean, these are all valid feelings, but it's a question of how you deal with the feelings when they arise.
When you said that you had mentors to help you slow down, was there a point when you thought it's a slow process and you wanted to give up?
You ask. Flo, you really are getting into the crux of things. Okay, so I have had a faith project for the past 3 years. There is something, and I'd like to rather not necessarily show what exactly it is, but to perhaps shed light on the process. And this particular dream and ambition was taking forever. 3 years is a long time to be holding on to one thing that you want to attain in your life, and it's just not happening. And I remember getting into a place where I thought maybe that thing is just not for me. But it kept sort of like nudging at me, and it just felt like this niggling feeling that like I shouldn't give up. And admittedly, I had moments of frustration, and I think everybody goes through moments of frustration. But I guess it's a question of having a good team around you to be able to help you navigate those moments and times, to be able to either cheer for you or encourage you or just make you feel like, it's okay. You are where you are, and at some point in time, the victory will be yours. But be patient along the journey. So I have amazing friends and I have an amazing support system that genuinely helps in the process.
I love the point that you say the victory will be yours and no one will take it away from you.
Correct.
You are a civil engineer, female civil engineer, and I'm sure
black female civil engineer.
Yes, and I'm sure it's a male-dominated career or field. Or so we were told. Maybe it's just there. Do you think this is a fact or just a stereotype that we have in our society?
interesting enough, when I entered the civil engineering fraternity, I was also under the impression that it's a male-dominated field. And admittedly, there was a time where women were not necessarily at the forefront of studying engineering because of gender roles. So after a time where the emancipation of the woman came about, where it was understood that a woman can do what a man can do, that process facilitated having female engineers. But when I was at school, when I was studying engineering, there were more women in my class than there were men. Oh. But I also felt that because I understood that I was going into a field where majority of the professionals are male, I needed to equip myself to be able to stand in a room with very big personalities and men at that. So I often tell the story that because of that is actually how I ended up doing radio, because I wanted to polish my speaking skills. I wanted to make sure that if ever I was to find myself in a room with that is male dominated, I'd be able to hold my voice as a female. So there are things that I did do to make sure that I could prepare myself for it. But to answer your question, the stereotype is outdated at this point in time because more women are entering the engineering field, and sometimes you find that there might actually be more women in the class than there are men.
You recently celebrated your 27th birthday.
Don't say that out loud. Yes, 27.
At that age, you have won a Pan-African Award for influential women in business and government and social welfare. Have it ever crossed your mind that the work you are doing is being recognized on an international level, and how did you feel?
I think I have had to grow with the awarding process, in that when the awarding happens, it happens after the work has been done. So in essence, that will be the product of what has happened over the years, but there's a lot of work that went into it. There might be recognition, yes, and I think it is nice to get a pat on the shoulder to just know that you're doing well, but I never get lost in the fact that, there's awarding that comes with it, because the moment I do that, I will start to be swept away by the awarding process as opposed to the actual work that I do and what it means to me. So has it crossed my mind that I'm awarded international accolades? Yes, it has, because it would make me incredibly ungrateful if that were not the case. And I'm really, really, from the bottom of my heart, incredibly grateful to the organizations that see my work and see deemed worthy of celebration. But at the end of the day, when I say my work in itself, it already doesn't sound right, because running a charity organization comes with a magnitude of people. There's so many volunteers, there's directors. It's not one person that can make this happen. So for one person's name to be on a certificate is a little unfair, if we're being honest, because there's so many other people's work and efforts that have gone into the project. Yes, I'm the head and I act as a chairperson, but at the end of the day, I just sometimes feel like the awarding and this award should probably go to the organization as opposed to an individual. I understand why it might be that I'll be the individual that's awarded, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I feel like there's me taking credit for work that has been done by a mass of people. So I think given a platform like this, I'm always keen to say that when there's a charity organization or initiative that is placed in a society as well as an environment, there is usually a team full of people who do the work, and I think they too deserve to be celebrated.
Yes, talking about your charity organization, tell us more about it.
The EM Love Foundation. So I started this charity organization when I was 20 years old, and this is because I'm
when you were 20.
Yes, I was 20 years old. I'm what they deem a first generational poverty cycle breaker. So it's first generation. I'm the first generation to not have been born into poverty from my parents. So my parents themselves grew up impoverished, and they had to work themselves out of poverty in order for me to have what I have. And because I understand their background and I understand the value that comes with having people sort of pull you out of poverty, I feel that there's a need for me, given everything that I've had growing up, to be able to sow back into my community so that more people like that can be created. So when I say created, I mean empowered, because if you empower people to be able to sort of work themselves out of poverty as well as equip them to be able to actually jump out of poverty, then as a result you influence an entire generation of children thereafter. You influence an entire family, and I think that's the importance of it at the end of the day, because else why do we do what we do,
That's very good.
So I think to answer your question, what does the EMLA Foundation do? We're a youth a youth group organization filled with many young people who feel a need to play their part in the role of working towards poverty eradication in Namibia.
Wow. You are a radio presenter and MC as well.
Yes.
You refuse to be defined by one profession. What led you into radio presenting? Is it just a hobby, or is something that you also love doing?
So earlier on, I mentioned that when I was studying engineering, I felt the need to enhance my speaking skills because I wanted to make sure that if ever I was to find myself in a boardroom, that I could actually voice my voice. What I did not anticipate is how far it would go. In that, I found later on in life that as opposed to it just having been about polishing my speaking skills, it later on transpired into me hosting the Namibian Annual Music Awards. It provided me platforms to speak at speaking engagements. There's just so much more that comes with it. And I think that's the value in allowing life to lead sometimes, in that you never know where the path might take you. So for me, initially, it just started because I wanted to polish my speaking skills. But later on in life, I realized that I really enjoyed it and I loved it. And so here we are.
One might be watching you now and they would want to pursue a career, or also they also want to be an MC one day and be a radio presenter.
Yes.
I read somewhere where you wrote that for you to be a radio presenter, you need to grow thick skin. That sounds a bit scary. Or what do you mean by that?
Well, the speaking fraternity in itself requires you to be very driven in what you're doing, and that requires a bit of a thick skin because of the fact that you're not always going to get a yes at every door and opportunity that you knock at, which means that you might, because even for myself, when I started off, I got a no from a local radio station. I'm not going to name it. And I could have easily decided, you know what, maybe this isn't for me, and just keep it moving. But I had to go back and try again. And so you find that you will probably have to try again, and that process can make one weary. But if it's really something that you're passionate about, and if it's really something that you really want to do, then in essence you need to get up and try again. So if I was to advise a young girl out there, or a boy out there who really wants to take up the space of public speaking, as well as perhaps entering the radio space, I say that you continuously try to firstly better yourself and your speaking skills, and secondly, you continue to look for opportunity after opportunity. And it doesn't matter how many no's you get, you keep getting back up until one day one door will open, and that might be the door of opportunity that you need to start your career.
Wow. The international award that you won.
Yes.
You had, when you were in London, you had an opportunity to meet the Queen.
Yeah.
How was that moment, and did you ever see yourself going that far?
Meeting Queen Elizabeth is unreal. That's what they don't tell you. It's far-fetched. It's like, really? And the moment goes by so quickly that before you know it, it's done, and you look back and you're like, wait, I just met the Queen of England, didn't I? But what I do like to mention about the experience is that it taught me that sometimes when we look at the path that we walk, we never know where that path will take us, and that's okay, because it could take you to the foot of the Queen of England. So take your chances, take your risks, do what you gotta do, and just hope that it all works out.
Don't you think it's a bit scary to take a road where you know where it's leading you?
I think you do have to have intention. So I'm not saying get up and just walk aimlessly, but I am saying that have intention and trust the process, because the process is going to reveal things that you might not have anticipated, because you're not going to have all your ducks in a row. You're not going to have it all figured out, and that's okay. Because I feel like a lot of the times when we find ourselves youthful, there's this need to know what happens next. There's a need to have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and a 15-year plan. And the moment one block doesn't go in accordance to the way that you had anticipated you'd build the building, automatically you feel discouraged. And I think if you allow yourself room to be able to navigate a space that does not necessarily have all the answers, you might find that there's a lot more to learn on the journey.
While you were in London, you were
Yes.
interviewed on BBC Africa Radio What did you speak about? Did you know you were going to be interviewed?
So they told us on the day that it was going to happen. So we didn't know prior. Because we all, as a Queen's Young Leaders cohort, went to the BBC in London. And so we went, we basically did a tour where they showed us what they do in the production. We got to see the behind the scenes. And we also got to test out some of the equipment. And so because some of us come from different aspects or rather regions, you're able to actually visit the radio station from your continent. So because I was African, I got to visit the BBC Africa radio, and then they chose a few of us to actually do an on-air interview. I spoke about poverty eradication because I feel like coming from the African continent where poverty is incredibly entrenched in our culture as well as our environments, it was fundamental for me to be able to voice that and speak on it, and also take away from this perception that, you know, we're just an impoverished continent, because there's a lot more to the African continent. However, it is a fundamental part of our heritage as well as story, as well as history, as well as circumstance. So that's what I spoke about.
Wow. How was the experience?
The experience of speaking on BBC?
Mm-hmm.
It was like home, you know. It was because of the fact that I do radio here back home. It didn't necessarily feel foreign.
It felt the same.
It felt exactly the same. It's a mic, it's a presenter, and you just speak. So I had to get outside of myself and not allow my nerves to override the moment, and just allow myself to do what I do best, which is speak.
Mavis, you blog as well.
Yes.
What do you normally write on your blog, or what do you focus on?
So my blog is a personal space where I can just develop, and I try to not box it in such a manner where there's an expectation, isn't as far as when I go on there, this is what I'm going to talk about. But in essence, I find that the common theme of my blog post generally has to do with self-development.
Okay.
And self-development in character, self-development in career, just developing yourself as the individual who has to navigate all these different spaces in life, and how you can better around yourself to be able to stand firm in those places. So it's in essence to just put it in as few terms as possible. It's about self-development.
Is that where your purpose lies on?
I don't know. I am 27 and I've got a whole lifetime ahead of me, and I'm gonna allow myself the space to navigate and just allow things to come to me at the pace that they should, and eventually one day it will all make sense. I do know that I'm incredibly passionate, and I also know that I have a true love for philanthropy as well as poverty eradication. What that means in the long run will basically figure itself out, and I'm okay with it.
Yes. In one of the newspaper articles, you mentioned that your greatest desire is to see the people become better versions of themselves.
Correct.
And you want to let your presence around people, just that it should be felt that you are there, you were there, and then this is the difference you made. Did you see a need in our society for such people, or you just have a passion for it?
I think our society is actually filled with people like that. The reason I say this is that for example, my journey, I've had a lot of help from people who've mentored me, people who've taken time out to even just give me 10 minutes of their time to speak into my life, people who have actually seen something in me and decided that they will take time out to nurture it. And I think it's really, really telling of our society, and that there's a lot of goodwill. But the goodwill is something that we ourselves need to be willing to tap into. And so for me particularly, I found that I was very, very keen on being the person who pays forward everything I've been taught. So when I have mentors planting to me, I plant it forward, because that's how you create a cycle of people who plant forward. So it is my hope and desire that whatever it is I'm ever able to be taught, that I teach someone, and then that person goes to go teach somebody else. And before we know it, we're just a society that loves to basically teach as well as pay forward whatever it is that we receive.
I know that I'm not the only one that read almost everything that you write, because the moment I read, I know that I will always come out with something.
Ah, thank you.
Yes, you write amazing things, and you are touching so many people's lives there. You know, they say that most of the times we don't even know who we are inspiring, so you don't need to stop what you are doing. But should you be given a chance to talk to a group of, let me say, the range between 20 to 30 women, what advice would you give them?
I think accept who you are. You know, a lot of the times when we're given an opportunity to plant into somebody's life, we're generally always speaking about, you know, what it is that you should do. But I'm not asking you to step outside of yourself, but rather step into yourself and accept who you are. Because in the process of self-acceptance is where your greatness lies. Because when you accept who you are, that's where you get to a time where you can actually, you know, sow and plant and make sure that you are impactful in whatever fraternity space you are. You could be a mother, you could be a trainer, you could be a pilot, you could be a teacher. It doesn't matter what space you're in. Because the moment you're able to accept yourself, you're able to pour out of yourself. But you cannot pour from an empty cup. First you pour into yourself, and then you can pour out. That's what I would say.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank
Such
you.
an incredible conversation we had today, and we have learned a lot. If a young lady at the age of 27 can achieve so much and change so many people's lives in Namibia, we can all do that. And until next time, see you.